Hey everyone, my name is Chris Lambert, and on this channel we talk Kanye West. And today we're talking Kanye's late registration, specifically the concept and themes around the album. If you've watched a number of videos or listened to our podcast, Watching the Throne, then you're probably familiar with our main theory about Kanye's discography, which is that each album is a fictional retelling or a little bit of a hyperbolization of that era of Kanye's life, right? So the College Dropout looks at Kanye in that 2002, well, really like 2000 to 2004, or even like 90s to 2004, right? Just him being in Chicago, getting his initial break with Jay-Z, and ending up as a signed artist to Rockefeller, right? You can track that through the first act, which is very Chicago based and Kanye looking to get on, right? So you have We Don't Care, All Falls Down, Kanye in the South Side of Chicago, Spaceship, Working at the Gap, Jesus Walks. He's starting his music career and hoping that this is the thing that makes him. And the first act ends with Never Let Me Down, where you have Jay-Z coming in representing Kanye being able to produce for Jay. And then the second act, Get 'Em High through Breathe In, Breathe Out, represents Kanye in the music industry as a producer, trying to figure out his way, trying to like make music that people enjoy, but not necessarily the music that he really wants to make because he wants to be a rapper. And you see that reflected in a lot of these songs where Get 'Em High, he's worried about people getting their hands in the air. New Workout Plan, he's trying to sell people on things. Slow Jams, he's slowing it down because that's what the girls want to dance to. And then Breathe In, Breathe Out, he's just like, here's some bullshit ice rap. Like, why am I doing this? Why am I talking about this? It's very deflating, right? That mid portion. And then you have School Spirit, where he catches that same energy that he had at the beginning, remembering like he's the dropout. He's not going to follow the rules. He's not going to do what people tell him to do, which leads to Two Words, Through the Wire, and Family Business, which is Kanye really flexing his abilities and showcasing what he brings to the table as an MC, whether it's like the strange combination of Mos Def and Freeway on Two Words, right? Or Through the Wire just being this like classic, instant classic, versus Family Business, which has the duality of being about just spending time with your family and the like complicated good that's there, as well as representing him joining the family of hip hop artists, right? And then you get Last Call, which is Kanye celebrating the fact that he has this successful album, even though the College Dropout hadn't come out yet, right? So the whole album kind of captures in narrative form what Kanye went through signing to Rockefeller and releasing this project. Late Registration picks up a year later in 2005, following the success of the College Dropout. And on We Major, he talks about why they called it Late Registration. So they asked me, why you call it Late Registration, Ye? Because we taken these motherfuckers back to school, right? Which there is a education on late registration, but it's not just showing that like we're flexing and we're major, right? There's a lot more that goes on to that. It's also probably a little bit representative of Kanye's late arrival in the game, right? He was 28 when this came out, which, you know, in a lot of the hip hop world, it's usually like late teens, early 20s. Those were the ones getting all the acclaim, all the fame, and Kanye coming in at 28. It's just like, it's about time I'm here and I've arrived. But when you look at this album, it doesn't have the same narrative that other Kanye albums have, right? Which for the most part, Travis and I feel that every Kanye album has a concept, right? And that's not even for the most part. We feel every Kanye album has a concept, and that almost all of them have narratives. Just like what I laid out on the College Dropout, like My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, Yeezus, The Life of Pablo, Ye, Jesus' King even. But the only two don't have a narrative, and that's Late Registration and 808s and Heartbreak. They still have their concept of what they're exploring, but you don't have the character journey that someone goes on. It's more just thinking about this one topic and really looking at it from different perspectives. For 808s and Heartbreak, that's grief, that's sadness, that's a disappointment in fame. And for Late Registration, it's kind of similar. It's just Kanye hasn't been jaded by fame yet. It's just in the aftermath of the College Dropout where he's just like wide-eyed and thinks fame's the gateway, or celebrity or success is the gateway to everything he's ever wanted. Now, a year and a half later, having gotten to experience what that's like, he's already starting to have this hesitation, right, when it comes to what is he getting himself into, which becomes pretty clear when you look at the final song on the album, right? And that's a key thing in any narrative or any concept that has a beginning, middle, and end, is you look at the end as the place that the whole thing's trying to get to. And for this, it's Gone, where Kanye starts the last verse with, I'm ahead of my time, sometimes years out, which it did take us years to realize how true that is. So the powers that be won't let me get my ideas out. And that make me want to get my advance out and move to Oklahoma and just live at my aunt's house. Wow. Thanks, Watch. And move to Oklahoma and just live at my aunt's house. Yeah, I romance the thought of leaving it all behind. Kanye, step away from the lime. This is 2005. Kanye's had one album and he's already fantasizing about leaving it all behind because it's stressful. And this stress is something that builds over the course of the album. And really the core of the album, and when we step back and look at the structure, the core comes through in these three songs right here. Heard 'Em Say, Touch the Sky, and Gold Digger. Heard 'Em Say really grounds us in the societal aspects of the album. Much like We Don't Care, much like All Falls Down, Spaceship even, it's Kanye looking at Chicago, looking at the place he grew up in, looking at Black America, and really reflecting on the tragedy that's part of that experience. And I heard him say, nothing's ever promised tomorrow. Today, from the shy like Tim, it's a harder way, right? That line right there is so key. Like when you're from Chicago, it's a harder way of going about things. When you're in the Black American experience, it's a harder way of going about things. Before you ask me to go get a job today, can I at least get a raise of the minimum wage? So this is almost bringing us back to that first act of College Dropout, right? Where Kanye's just like in the depths of Chicago, struggling to get by, struggling to get on, and reflecting about everything that's around him and what he's seeing, both the eagerness, the desperation, the goals, the mindset, and all of this kind of shapes and fuels him. But you kind of move past that on Touch the Sky, right? Which is so celebratory. It still has that reflective nature to it, in the fact that you have Kanye saying, back when they thought pink polos would hurt The Rock, before Cam got the shit to pop, the doors was closed. Like Kanye wasn't able to get on, and he's taking us back to that point. Same, like Heard 'Em Say was kind of set in the past. But by the end of the first verse, Kanye's had success. He's met Jay, he got his advance, right? And now Jay's like, dog in due time, but then saying, damn dog, you where I am, a hip hop legend. Like, oh, Kanye's adding on that a hip hop legend. Jay's not telling him after one album a hip hop legend, I don't think, but Kanye's most certainly calling himself a hip hop legend after one album. But you can see that there's like such excitement, like I'm sky high. And Lupe Fiasco at this time was just an unknown kid from Chicago, much like how Kanye had been. And Lupe represents that version of Kanye. Like he had been known in the underground scene, right? If you're into like underground rap, indie rap, you probably had heard of Lupe in 2005, but this was his first major feature on a major album. And Lupe really shone. He's another kid from Chicago, and Kanye is just like, hey, look, I'm doing like for Lupe what I wish others would have done for me. And Lupe's had a career ever since, right? But then you have Gold Digger. So you have Heard 'Em Say that's like what Chicago was like. And then you have Touch the Sky that's I've found success. So you kind of get a quick run of College Dropout, right? With Heard 'Em Say kind of capturing this front half and Touch the Sky capturing this like final part. But Gold Digger takes us to a place that we hadn't been able to get to on the College Dropout because Kanye at that point had never experienced fame in the way that he had after releasing the College Dropout. And what we see is this edition of Gold Digger, which is there are dangers to being successful. And it's done playfully. I think people get kind of sick of this song because of how much radio play it had, or even in like current culture view it as too misogynistic, even though at the end he does flip it on his head and say that this girl that was loyal to this guy who had ambition and she's with him even in the early days, but then once he gets on, he leaves her for a white girl and she's just left like, what was my loyalty worth? And Kanye saying like, get down, girl, go ahead, get down. Like, you need to go do what you do because guys are going to do what guys do. It's really like a playful early look at what Kanye would much seriously deconstruct on Blood on the Leaves when it comes to Yeezus, at this dehumanization that occurs through consumerism, especially in relationships and how men use women and women use men. But here it's done in this like playful kind of way where Kanye has this vision of what could happen to him, right? He meets this girl, she has a bunch of kids, she starts like luring him in and he's spending money on her, he's spending money on the kids, and even though he's warned that she has a baby by Busta, this isn't the first time she's gold digged. This is the first time she's done this. And then that she fucked with Usher, this isn't even the second time. Like, this is her thing. This is what she does. But even knowing that, Kanye's still like, I don't care what none of y'all say. I still love her. Like, that's the danger, right? That you get money and you get caught. And then in the second verse, that's just kind of describes that happening to somebody. It's like Kanye stepping out and more broadly looking at the scenario. But when you look at this song more broadly, what it's getting at is that when you're successful, there's still traps, there's still pitfalls. It's not the same thing as the traps and pitfalls in Chicago, right? Where he came from, what he grew up with, but it's also not the like paradise that he thought it was going to be coming out of the College Dropout. So with these three songs and the energy they carry of kind of like low, high, and gray neutral middle ground, you get into the rest of the track list. And you can see that you have these first three songs, a skit, like Broke Fi Broke, skit 1, and then this middle section, which is the longest section on the album that goes from Drive Slow to Addiction, then skit 2, and then we have couplets, right? We have Diamonds from Sierra Leone remix and We Major, and then skit 3, sorry. And then Hey Mama and Celebration before we get to skit 4, and then we conclude with Gone. And the same kind of thing we talked about earlier, where we said you look at the final track or the end of a story to see what the point of the story was. You look at this middle section and it starts with Drive Slow, which is a very cautionary tale where it starts with Kanye talking about his friend Molly, right? And it's very personal, again, takes us back to Chicago when Kanye was a teenager and in high school, and his friend Molly's dad dies. Molly gets money. Molly gets a nice car. He gets rims. He's wearing nice clothes. All these girls are giving him attention, and Kanye doesn't have any of that. He's just kind of following along like a little brother and looking up to his friend, getting to experience vicariously or observe the attention and lifestyle that his friend gets to have. And you can see right here, hit the freeway, go at least about 80, boned so much that summer, even had him a baby. And how Kanye phrases it is like, oh, he got to have so much sex, he had a baby, how cool is that? And you see that at the end, he's like, I'm trying to get in some drawers, so put me on with these hoes, homie. Like, he's asking Molly, like, introduce me to these girls, I want to experience what you're experiencing. And Molly's response to him is, don't rush to get grown, drive slow, homie, which is very cautionary, right? And plays back on what we just heard with Gold Digger, right? You don't know what you're getting yourself into when you rush into these relationships, but you can zoom out from that and look at fame itself. It's not just these interpersonal relationships. It's not just growing up, but it's getting involved with fame and the stresses that are there. And you might think that it's going to be this great thing, but there are consequences. That point, like we just described with that trio of Heard 'Em Say, Touch the Sky, and Gold Digger, is reiterated over and over and over again throughout moments on these songs over the rest of the album. And then you might be wondering what this first verse then has to do with Paul Wall and GLC. And that's exactly it, because Kanye is getting much more into the personal, right? Like the very grounded, like story-driven connection between like people and the humanity aspect of it, Paul Wall and GLC are just kind of like rappers flexing. And when Paul Wall talks about driving slow, it's not like, hey, don't rush to get grown. It's, hey, I don't want to drive past these women that I could sleep with. We need to drive slow so I have a better chance of seeing them, talking with them, succeeding with them. It's just braggadocio, like, which done in like a clever way, right? Like with a good flow, it's interesting, great imagery, but it seems much more one dimensional compared to what Kanye is doing here. But I think that's on purpose because Kanye takes it from just like interesting backstory, and Paul Wall and GLC make the connection to fame, right? That this just isn't about like, don't grow up too quickly. It's like, don't rush into fame too quickly because there are these things about it that can be alluring and glitz and glam. But as we see, there's also opportunity cost and danger. And My Way Home is very similar in that regard. It takes us back to the idea, because it is Common, of Chicago. But even in that verse, Common starts to make it about not just Chicago, but fame. So it starts off with, they say home is where my hate, they say home is where the hate is. My dome is where fate is. I stroll where souls get lost like Vegas, which could be referring to Chicago and the death rate in Chicago, and Common being from Chicago. Seen through the eyes of rebel glasses, pray to God that my arms reach the masses. Like, he wants to speak to his fellow Chicagoans, right? The young smoke grass and grassless jungles, rubber band together in cashless bundles, just talking about inner city life and the drugs and the desperation. Like, but by the end of it, he's talking about here, show money becomes bail, relationships become jail. Like, the money that you get from doing these shows, the money that you get from fame becomes bail money. What you're doing to get out of fame, like you're spending just to get out of where you're from. Relationships become jail. Like, the people that you're around, which were called real friends and wolves that Kanye would get to in The Life of Pablo in 2016, right? There's something that changes from just Chicago to more of being an artist. And even the initial, the sample that this is based on, Home is Where the Hatred Is by Gil Scott-Heron, you can see that in the first verse, it's a junkie walking through the twilight. I'm on my way home. I left 3 days ago, but no one seems to know. Home is where the hatred is. Home is filled with pain, and it might not be such a bad idea if I never went home again. From that verse, you get this idea that a junkie going down the street has a complicated home life and is either a junkie because of this complicated home life, whether it's an abusive parent or siblings or just whatever the scenario is, or even being a junkie has caused this break that's made it hard to go home. You think that it's about the home life. But you see in this third verse that he goes, home is where I live inside my white powder dreams. Home was once an empty vacuum that's filled now with my silent screams. Home is where the needle marks. So home isn't just this physical space. It's not just this house. It's his drug addiction, right? And when he's saying it might not be such a bad idea if I never went home again, it's I should not be an addict. I should not be into drugs so I can go back to my actual home, right? So I can have good relationships again, positive relationships, and not be in this place of drug addiction, which that duality present in that song makes its way into the duality of My Way Home, which makes its way into the duality of Late Registration. Like, look at addiction and you have a similar thing play out, right? Like, the first song in this section is Drive Slow, where we're told, like, hey, you need to take it easy because bad things can happen. But this section ends with addiction, with Kanye saying, why everything that's supposed to be bad make me feel so good? Everything they told me not to is exactly what I would. Man, I tried to stop, man. I tried the best I could. That's exactly it. If you don't drive slow, you get addicted, and some bad things can occur. You get some highlights, right? But there are some lowlights. And in this verse, you can see that there is a relationship dynamic. Like, she's got the same thing about me, but more about us. She's coming over, so I guess that means I'm her drug. The song kind of plays out this infidelity that's taking place between like Kanye and this girl, and whether or not they should or shouldn't, and they only see each other when they're drunk and high, and this can't be good. And why that might seem like a bit superficial on the surface or one dimensional on the surface, when you make the connection that this is Kanye's relationship to fame as well, and not just what's going on in his interpersonal life, there's that additional layer that plays into the rest of the album. So you can start to see how this song becomes very important, not just as talking about like addictions happen, but about how there is danger in fame, much in the same way that Gold Digger had as well. And you can see like a similar thing in Roses, right? Where Kanye's like just at the hospital to visit his grandma who's going under for surgery and may not make it. And the nurse is asking for autographs. And she's like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm famous enough to where the nurses are distracted and not helping us and asking for autographs, but I'm not famous enough that I can just bring in Magic Johnson's doctors and cure my grandma. Like, I don't have that NBA champion basketball player money that Magic has, and because of that, my grandma's like not going to make it. So even there, you're seeing the limitations of fame, right? That you get the hassle of being recognized without actually having the finances to change the things that you want to change. And then in this second section, Diamonds from Sierra Leone and We Major, it starts to get into not just Kanye's like interpersonal stuff and not just the trappings of fame, but Rockefeller itself. Diamonds from Sierra Leone is really specifically as like conscious as it is talking about diamonds from Sierra Leone and blood diamonds and shining a spotlight on the fact that there's this inhuman diamond trade that goes on, or diamond trafficking that goes on. It's really about the drama within Rockefeller. At this point, Dame Dash and Jay had split, and Rockefeller had been sold to Def Jam, and Jay had become Def Jam president. And artists had picked sides. Some had gone to Jay-Z, some had gone to Dame Dash under Dame Dash's new label. Kanye had stuck with Jay. And this gets talked about in the OG version of Diamonds from Sierra Leone a little more pointedly, but it also gets talked about here. And Jay, throughout most of his verse, is reinforcing the status of Rockefeller and how he takes care of his artists. It's almost an advertisement for artists to still sign with him, stay with him. Like, it's interesting. And then We Major kind of is like a similar thing. It's not about Rockefeller, right? But about making sure that there's still a bridge, because Kanye wants to reconnect Jay and Dame. Kanye wants to make sure The Rock stays alive. And then you see him bring Nas into the very next song. And we're only a couple years removed at this point from the beef between Jay-Z and Nas. That was one of the most highly like talked about beefs in rap of all time. And there was real hatred between the two of them, right? It's not like the Kanye 50 Cent beef where they're just kind of like, oh, you sold more than me. How dare you? It's like, yo, we hate each other. And Kanye to have Nas on the very next song is almost like, yo, I'm not just trying to bridge the gap in Rockefeller. I'm trying to bridge the gap in hip hop. I'm trying to have Jay on a song and Nas on a song and be that go-between. And as long as I'm here, you know there's not going to be any riffs. It's really interesting. But then at the same time, still illustrates that even in these upper levels of rap and celebrity and stardom, you have this drama. You have this like antagonism that can occur, that it's not just all greatness, right? And even We Major, it's kind of framed as a question because Kanye is just like, you know, kind of 1 year removed from the College Dropout. Like, We Major? Yeah, we major. We major, right? We major. Yeah, that's right. It's pretty fascinating in that way to have that. And then skip 3, Broke 5 Broke Again, and Hey Mama and Celebration, you get something similar where Hey Mama is Kanye looking back on what his mom did for him, how his mom comforted him. You're still getting that tension between past, present, and future, because it's what was going on before, where they're at now, and what Kanye wants to do for his mom moving ahead. Beautiful song, not really any complications to this song, right? It's just kind of pure and wonderful. But then Celebration, you have Kanye imagining having a kid, right? Which kind of pays off on Drive Slow, where Molly kind of got his money, started having this success and attention, and had him a baby. And now has to deal with having a baby and all of that. Not necessarily like an awful thing, right? But just complicating. And then here in Celebration, Kanye fucking around, has a baby, and now he's gonna be a dad. And he's finding pride in it, especially coming off of Hey Mama, but also seeing like the consequences of that lifestyle, right? But he's also in a place at this point where he has success, he has money. So raising a kid for him wouldn't be as big of a deal. The kid's not growing up in Heard 'Em Say. The kid's not having a Drive Slow like upbringing and lifestyle. The kid's very much born into this next level, which is so much of what this album's about, is about this rising up and trying to bring people with you. Kanye wants to bring Chicago with him the same way that Common does. Like, he brought Lupe on. He has Really Doe on We Major, right? Which is his childhood friend since 15. Like, there's something about him. He has Consequence, right? On Gone. He really wants to make sure other people succeed, right? Which kind of gets at Broke Fi Broke as well, because Broke Fi Broke has a very negative mentality. And this Kanye's first foray really into that monolithic thought that he really addressed much more clearly and plainly in 2018 as something that was a huge problem for him, that everybody tells you because you are black, you have to vote this way or think this way. The same way if you're from New York and you tell someone like, oh, I don't like the Knicks. They're like, are you a real New Yorker? Or I'm from Ohio and I don't like Ohio State. If I tell people from Ohio I don't like Ohio State, some people get upset. And those are like way more superficial and like goofy examples than what Kanye kind of talks about, and the more serious instances of monolithic thought, right, that can take place in any kind of group, small or large. But monolithic thought is something that we all experience any day. If you don't agree with the group, then you're kicked out of the group or judged by the group. And there can be good things for that, like somebody being like, oh, I think we should eat children. And you're kind of like, no, get out of the group, right? But if somebody's just like, hey, like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to watch football anymore. And they're like, you're not American, get out of the country. That would be excessive. But Broke Fry Broke, everybody, they establish or make being broke kind of a religion or an ambition, that you should be broke, you need to be broke, that you can't not be broke. And it's this mindset that drives them and fuels them and keeps them in this place of being broke. And anybody else that starts to rise up, they kick out of the group, they challenge, they make feel bad about it, which is really what you get to in skit 4, is Kanye being made to feel bad about buying shoes and showering. And it's done in this comedic and ridiculous way, but it also is kind of the inverse of what he experiences in celebrity. You need to act a certain way when you're a celebrity. You need to do certain things when you're a celebrity. There's this expectation of who you should be and how you should be. But not even then, it's also getting back to kind of the mindset that keeps people from achieving what they want. It gets back to Heard 'Em Say and this idea of, so I guess we just pray like the ministers say, Allahu Akbar, and throw in some hot cars. We know Kanye's very much against or critical of consumerism and consumerist culture, which there's a whole irony there, right, and hypocrisy there to certain degrees, with Kanye becoming a part of that consumerist culture and succeeding off of that consumerist culture. His $3.3 billion coming from selling $200 shoes, right? But at the same time, he's still critical of the mindset that takes people there, and is still, ironically or hypocritically enough, trying to change it even while joining part of that system, which is a whole discussion for another time. But I think that's kind of what Kanye is attacking, is this limiting mindset that keeps people back, and the critical groupthink that really drains you of the energy. So that's what you get leading into Gone, and this idea that, you know, he might step away from the limelight because there's just too much going on that's kind of driving him crazy. Um, and he goes back again, like, before model chicks was bending over, or dealerships asked me Benzarova, man, if I could just get one beat on Hova. So the same way that he goes back to this time, the way he did on Touch the Sky, he comes back to it one more time, which just reinforces the past, present, future themes that are so prevalent on this album in a way that they aren't really on other Kanye albums. Like, time is such a huge thematic point here. And then you eventually end with this vision of Kanye leaving. Shorty's at the door because they need more inspiration for their life, they souls, and they songs. They said, sorry, Mr. West is gone. And notice that it's like everyone, right? Like, the penultimate line on the album is that shorties need inspiration for their life, right? Which kind of gets back to Heard 'Em Say and Drive Slow. They souls, same kind of thing, right? And they songs, which is the fame aspect of it, the industry aspect of it, the Touch the Sky, the We Major, like the Diamonds from Sierra Leone. So those are really kind of the aspects that we see reflected in Heard 'Em Say and Touch the Sky, is the soul and the songs, like real life stuff and real music industry stuff, day to day versus celebrity. It's really, I don't know, complex and fascinating. And we used to tout the College Dropout because of that narrative, putting it above Late Registration. But I think personally at this point, even though Late Registration doesn't necessarily have the narrative that I cherish so much and usually puts albums ahead of other albums for me, but there's so much complexity to this album, and it's so well layered and so well put together. And once you kind of have this knowledge of what the album's doing, you go back and you listen to every song and see how much every song comes back to these core concepts. It's really impressive. And Late Registration, I don't think gets the, even though it's still considered one of Kanye's best albums, still gets ranked in like best hip hop albums of all time. I think it was in the top 500 albums of all time from Rolling Stone. Even though it has those accolades, I still think it's underrated because a lot of the concepts are still misunderstood, not known, not discussed, and not talked about, right? The same way that people do with every Kendrick Lamar album. Until we start looking at Kanye albums with the same glasses that we look at every Kendrick album, Kanye albums are underrated, which is insane because they're still considered some of the greatest albums of all time, while people have only scratched the surface of what they're doing. Amazing. So that's it for Late Registration. Thanks for spending 33 minutes of your time with me. If you're enjoying the channel and you want to support us, the easiest way is liking, subscribing, commenting, as those things tell YouTube that this is a channel people enjoy, and then they show it to more people. Otherwise, we have our podcast, Watching the Throne. We have one season available at a time on Apple and Spotify and wherever you listen to podcasts. Currently, it's our College Dropout season with one new episode releasing each week. But on our Patreon, you have our whole catalog of song analyses available. All of College Dropout, our current Late Registration redo that we're doing, as well as Jesus is King, Yay, and Kids See Ghosts. And once we're done with Late Registration, we'll jump back for our 2.0 run through of Graduation, 808's My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, Yeezus, and The Life of Pablo. And you'll get those episodes right away rather than having to wait like 3 to 6 months or more for some of those episodes. And I'm going to go drink a lot of water. Until next time, stay wavy and keep it loopy. Cheers.